The first time I heard my wife's voice after her funeral, it wasn't in my head. It was a 3-second voicemail from an unknown number that said, very calmly, "Don't sign anything. Normal life. Everything was fine. If you'd met us 6 months earlier, you would have filed us under ordinary. Quiet apartment, 2 steady incomes, Sunday groceries, a shared calendar with color-coded reminders, and a running joke about who forgot to buy dish soap last. Mara liked order the way some people like sunlight. She labeled spice jars. She folded towels into identical rectangles. She made lists, then made lists of the lists. It wasn't rigid exactly. It was comforting. Living with Mara felt like walking into a room where the furniture would never be moved without warning. I was the opposite. I left cupboard doors open. I ate standing up. I said, "We'll figure it out," and meant it as a philosophy. Mara pretended it annoyed her, but she smiled every time I said it, like she was collecting proof that chaos could be harmless. Our biggest fights were polite. Whether the bathroom fan should run after showers, how much money belonged in savings, and my habit of reading work emails during dinner. She worked in payroll for a mid-sized company. Nothing glamorous, but stable. I did IT support for a logistics firm. Also not glamorous, also stable. We weren't rich, but our bills were paid, and our refrigerator wasn't empty. We talked about a baby sometimes, in the abstract, like you talk about a trip you haven't booked yet. Mara would touch her own stomach absent-mindedly while she talked about daycare costs, and I'd nod while imagining tiny socks. There were no screaming matches, no shattered plates, no signs, until there were. Micro red flags, small details you almost ignore. It started with a folder. One night, Mara came home later than usual and held a thin manila folder against her chest like it was fragile. She said it was just some paperwork from work, year-end stuff. Payroll was full of paperwork, so I didn't ask questions. But later, when she was showering, I saw it on the kitchen table. The folder had no company logo, no printed label, only one thing written on the tab in Mara's neat block letters: Hartley. That wasn't our last name. It wasn't anyone's last name that I knew. I didn't open it. That's the truth, and it's the kind of truth you regret later because it sounds like stupidity. But in the moment, I told myself it would be invasive. I told myself marriage wasn't a warrant. When she came out of the shower, hair dripping, she saw my eyes flick toward the folder and slid it into her bag too quickly. "Just work," she said, too cheerful. "Okay," I said, and my voice did the same too cheerful thing back. After that, there were other small things. Mara stopped leaving her phone face up. She started charging it on her side of the bed with the screen down, as if the display might betray her in her sleep. She changed a password on the home Wi-Fi and didn't mention it until I couldn't connect. "Oh, sorry," she said, then gave me the new password, smiling like it was nothing. I thought it might be safer. "From what?" She shrugged. "Just safer." Then there was the mailbox. We got a thick envelope one afternoon addressed to Mara, but not to our address. It had our building number wrong by 2 digits. Same street name, wrong number. I noticed because I was the one who checked the mail. When I brought it upstairs, Mara took it from my hand fast enough that the paper brushed my skin. "What's that?" I asked lightly. "Probably junk," she said, already tearing it open. It wasn't junk. I caught a glimpse of the letterhead before she folded it in half. A clean logo, 2 words in bold, Gideon and Kerr, a law firm. She saw my look and laughed once, short. "It's nothing. They keep sending weird stuff from an old account. I'll deal with it." But she didn't throw it away. She didn't leave it lying around. It disappeared like it had never existed. The last red flag was the night she woke up crying. Not sobbing, no noise, just breath hitching, shoulders moving in that quiet, contained way like her body was trying to keep the sound inside. I woke because the mattress shifted. "Mara?" I whispered. She wiped her face quickly like I'd caught her doing something embarrassing. "Bad dream," she said. "What about?" She shook her head. "Just Being late, missing something. That's your dream? Being late? She tried to smile, her eyes were wet. I know. Pathetic. It's not pathetic. I reached for her hand. Talk to me. She pulled her hand away, not violently but decisively. Then she got out of bed and went to the bathroom and shut the door. The bathroom fan ran for a long time. When she came back, her face was calm, in a way that felt practiced, like she'd applied it in the mirror. The next morning she made pancakes. She even put fruit on top. She acted like a person trying very hard to look like herself. I let her. Because the terrifying thing about micro red flags is you can always explain them. And I did. Discovery moment, the turn. 3 weeks later, Mara didn't come home. At first it wasn't dramatic. It was 7:15 p.m., then 7:45, then 8:30. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I texted. I called again. I told myself the battery died. I told myself she was stuck in traffic. I told myself she'd surprise me with takeout. At 9:12 p.m., my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Is this Jonah? A woman asked. Yes. This is the emergency department. Your wife, Mara. She's been admitted. My body went cold so fast it felt like someone had poured water into my veins. What happened? There's been an accident, the woman said, careful. You need to come to the hospital. I remember grabbing my keys and locking the door behind me and then unlocking it again because I couldn't remember if I'd locked it the first time. I remember running down the stairs too fast, nearly slipping. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I hadn't taken the trash out, and Mara would hate that if... I don't remember the drive. I remember flashing lights, the smell of disinfectant, the way hospital air feels like it's been scrubbed of anything human. A doctor met me in a hallway and said my name like he was trying to soften the edges. I'm sorry, he said. The words were simple and familiar. Everyone knows them, but when they're aimed at you, they become heavy objects. He explained, a car, an intersection, a drunk driver, trauma. He said they'd done everything. I waited for my brain to argue, to find the loophole. It didn't. My brain went silent, like a power outage. They let me see her for a few minutes. Mara looked smaller. Her skin was pale under harsh light. There were bandages and tubes and the curve of her hairline. Still perfect. Still Mara. I kissed her forehead and it was cold. And I told her, stupidly, that the pancakes had been good. Then they moved me to a small room where someone asked questions about funeral arrangements, like they were asking about airline seats. I signed papers I didn't read. And somewhere in that storm of paperwork and dazed consent, a woman in a blazer handed me a plastic bag with Mara's belongings. Phone, wallet, keys, a thin manila folder. The tab read, Hartley. When I looked up, the woman in the blazer was already walking away. Realization, the brain clicks. Grief makes you slow. It makes you accept things you shouldn't. It makes you fold into procedures because procedures are easier than feeling. I went home alone, placed the bag on the kitchen table, and stood there staring at it as if it might instruct me. I picked up Mara's phone. It was locked. I tried her usual code, our anniversary. Wrong. I tried her birthday. Wrong. My hands started shaking, not just from grief, but from something sharper, uglier, the sensation of being excluded. I opened her wallet more out of reflex than suspicion. Her driver's license was there, our address, her photo, her credit card, a loyalty card from the grocery store. And then, behind the cards, in the inner slot where you keep things you don't want falling out, a second ID. It was Mara's face, no question. Same eyes, same mouth, different name. Leah Hartley. I sat down hard enough that the chair scraped the floor. My first thought wasn't she lied to me. My first thought was this must be fake, some weird mistake, something she carried for work. But it looked real. It had the same texture as her license, the same hologram shimmer, the same weight of officialness. I pulled out the manila folder with hands that didn't feel like mine and opened it. Inside were documents, copies, Neatly ordered: birth certificate, social security card, a bank statement, a lease agreement, all for Leah Hartley, and then a sheet of paper on top that didn't belong with the others. It was folded once, like it had been opened and closed repeatedly. It was a letter from Gideon and Kerr. The letter said, in careful legal language, that the estate of Thomas Hartley required a signature for final disbursement, and that Leah Hartley had been unresponsive. It asked her to contact them immediately. Thomas Hartley, estate. My mouth went dry. I tried to swallow and couldn't. Estate meant death. Death meant inheritance. Inheritance meant money. Money meant motive. The folder slid from my hands and paper spilled across the table like snow. That was when my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Unknown number. I pressed play. Mara's voice, calm and precise. Don't sign anything. 3 seconds. Then the beep. My brain didn't process it as impossible. It processed it as a command, and something inside me, some buried part that had been trying to stay soft, made a hard, clean click. Mara hadn't just died. Mara had been living a life I'd never seen. Confrontation, silence. The next days happened in fragments. People came over with casseroles. They said, "Let me know if you need anything," and I nodded like a doll. Mara's mother cried so hard she gagged. Her brother punched a wall in my hallway and apologized immediately, shaking. I played the role everyone expected, the devastated husband. I was devastated. But grief was no longer alone inside me. It had roommates. Confusion, anger, fear, a tight, sick curiosity. The funeral was small. Mara would have wanted it that way. Simple flowers, no long speeches, people murmuring about how young she was, how unfair, how sudden. I stared at the casket and waited for the universe to correct itself, to have her sit up and say, okay, stop panicking. It didn't. After the funeral, I went home and opened the folder again. I photographed everything with my phone. I made copies. I tucked the originals back in order the way Mara would have, because even now, even betrayed, I couldn't stop thinking of her hands. Then I did the thing grief makes you do when you're desperate for structure. I called the law firm. Gideon and Kerr answered with the bright tone of people who deal in business and not blood. Gideon and Kerr, how can I help? I cleared my throat. I'm calling about Leah Hartley. A pause, subtle but immediate, like a door being quietly locked. May I ask who's calling? My name is Jonah, I said. I'm her husband. Silence. I'm sorry, the woman said carefully, but we can only speak to Ms. Hartley directly. I almost said dead, then stopped because part of me still didn't want to put that word next to her. She passed away. Another pause. I heard typing. I'm very sorry to hear that, the woman said, and her tone changed into something firm. Do you have documentation? Yes. Then you'll need to send it to us. And, sir? Yes? If Ms. Hartley passed away, then this matter may become more complicated. Complicated how? Silence again, longer this time. I'm not authorized to discuss details, she said. Please send documentation. When I hung up, my hands were sweating. That night, I listened to the voicemail again and again until the sound of Mara's voice began to feel like a bruise. Don't sign anything. Why would she say that? Who would be asking me to sign? The hospital? The police? Her family? Or the law firm? The next morning, 2 people in dark suits knocked on my door. Not police, not grief counselors. They introduced themselves as representatives of an insurance investigation unit. They were polite. They sat at my kitchen table and opened notebooks. One of them had a face that looked carved out of patience. We're very sorry for your loss, the older one said. We need to ask a few questions related to the accident. I answered. Location, time, what I knew. Then the younger one leaned forward. Did your wife have any other names? He asked. My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. Why? I asked. He exchanged a glance with the older one. There are discrepancies, the older one said. in records associated with her employment and financial accounts. Discrepancies. That word has no emotion in it. It's a clean word. It's the kind of word people use when they don't want to say fraud. I didn't answer quickly enough. The younger one watched my face the way a doctor watches a monitor. "Sir," he said gently, "we need full transparency." I stared at them. I thought of the folder, the second ID, the voicemail. And I realized something else. I wasn't the only one who'd been kept in the dark. Mara had built a secret big enough to attract professionals. I swallowed. I found paperwork, I said. A folder with a different name. "What name?" the older one asked. "Leah Hartley?" The older man's pen stopped. He didn't look surprised. He looked confirmed. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That helps." "Helps what?" I demanded, and for the first time since the hospital, I heard anger come out of my own mouth, raw and uncontrolled. "What is this? Who was my wife?" They didn't answer directly. The older man closed his notebook with a soft, final sound. "We'll be in touch," he said. "Please do not dispose of any personal documents." When they left, my apartment felt suddenly staged, like a set after the actors have gone home. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the chair where Mara sat when she paid bills. Then I did something I hadn't done in our entire marriage. I opened her laptop. Mara's laptop had always been hers. She used it for work, and I respected that boundary. Also, Mara was meticulous. She didn't leave her devices unlocked, but there was a sticky note on the underside of the desk drawer. I found it by accident while looking for a pen. It had 4 numbers written in her block letters. Not our anniversary. Not her birthday. A code. My hands trembled as I typed it. The laptop unlocked. On the desktop was a single folder named, blandly, Archive. Inside were scanned documents, emails, and a spreadsheet with rows of names and numbers. Some columns were labeled account, amount, date, status. It looked like someone tracking money. And at the top of the spreadsheet, highlighted in a pale color, was one name repeated, Thomas Hartley. In the email folder, there was a chain titled Final Disbursement from Gideon and Kerr. I clicked the most recent message. It was addressed to Leah Hartley. It said, in polished language, that the estate would be released upon verification of identity and signature, and that failure to respond might trigger legal action. I scrolled down, and there, buried in the thread, was an earlier message from Mara, written as Leah. It was short, no emotion, just one line. "If anything happens to me, do not involve Jonah." I stared until the words blurred. My name, typed by her, like a stranger. My throat made a sound I didn't recognize. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Another voicemail. I pressed play. This one was longer. 12 seconds. Mara's voice. Quieter now. Like she was in a car with the windows up. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. Don't trust anyone who says they're helping. And Jonah, please, don't look for me." Then the beep. I sat there with my hand over my mouth because the sob that rose up wasn't just grief anymore. It was the sound of a person realizing their entire life had been built beside a hidden trapdoor. I had to confront her, but she was gone. So, I confronted the only thing I could, the shape of her absence. I went to the address on one of the documents in the folder, an old lease under Leah Hartley's name, dated years before I met her. It was a small building across town. I stood outside like a stalker, hating myself, then buzzed the unit number. A woman answered on the intercom. "Hello? I'm looking for Leah Hartley," I said. Silence. Then, "Who is this?" "My name is Jonah. I think she lived here." Silence again, heavy. The door buzzed open. Inside, the hallway smelled like dust and cooked onions. The woman who opened the apartment door was in her late 60s, hair pulled back, eyes sharp with suspicion that had been sharpened by experience. She looked at my face, and her expression changed in a way I didn't expect. Not recognition, exactly, but pain. You're him, she said. My stomach tightened. Who? Jonah. She said my name like she'd practiced it. She talked about you. She's... My voice cracked. She died. The woman's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were wet but controlled. Come in, she said. Her apartment was small and tidy, the kind of tidy that comes from living alone and not wanting anyone to see your mess. On a shelf were framed photos. In one, Mara, Leah, stood younger, hair shorter, smiling stiffly beside a man with broad shoulders and a smile that looked rehearsed. The man's arm was around her, but her body leaned away. Who is that? I asked, though I already felt the answer forming like nausea. The woman sat down carefully, as if her joints carried their own grief. That's Thomas, she said. Thomas Hartley. The name hit the air like a slap. He was... her husband? I managed. The woman's laugh was small and bitter. He was a lot of things. My ears rang. Why didn't she tell me? The woman looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, Because telling you would have put you in danger. I stared. Danger from who? The woman's gaze flicked to the photo again. From him, she said. Even dead, he had reach. Even dead, he had people. Dead. Estate, disbursement, names, money. My life tilted. Was she using me? I whispered. The woman flinched at that like I'd insulted someone she'd loved. No, she said fiercely. She loved you. That's the one thing I'm sure of. That's what made it complicated. Then why the lie? I said. Wait, the other name. The woman's eyes softened into exhaustion. She ran, she said, years ago. From Thomas, from what he did, from what he threatened. I heard my own heartbeat, loud and stupid. Then why was she involved with his estate? I asked. Why was a law firm contacting her? The woman hesitated, and in that hesitation was an ocean. Then she stood and went to a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. The seal was old, the paper slightly yellowed. She brought it to me like she was handing over something alive. She left this, the woman said, with me. She said if you ever came, if you ever asked, then I should give it to you. My hands shook as I took it. It had my name on it, written in Mara's handwriting. Jonah. I couldn't breathe properly. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. You knew, I said, voice thin. The woman's face tightened. I knew she was hiding. I didn't know she married you under a different name until later. And when I did, she begged me not to interfere. My throat burned. So everyone knew except me. No, she said, not everyone. Just the people she didn't want to lose. I stared at the envelope, then at the woman. Why would she record those voicemails? I asked. The woman's voice dropped. Because she was afraid she wouldn't get to explain. My fingers tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter. 3 pages, handwritten. Mara's handwriting was steady, but there were places where the ink pressed harder, like emotion had tightened her grip. I read, and with each paragraph the silence inside me filled with a new kind of sound. A long, slow breaking. Mara, Leah, had married Thomas Hartley young. He'd been charming in public, brutal in private. He controlled money. He controlled friends. He controlled narratives. When she tried to leave, he threatened to ruin her, to bury her in legal fees, to make sure no one believed her. She ran anyway. She changed her name. She disappeared. She built a new life under Mara. She met me. She loved me. She wrote that word, loved, like she was forcing herself to commit it to paper. Then Thomas died. Not suddenly, illness, quiet, private, and when he died, his estate became a thing that had to be processed, distributed, finalized. Lawyers began reaching out to his widow, Leah, Mara. She'd ignored them at first, but then an email came from Gideon and Kerr saying Thomas had left money to Leah with conditions, and if she didn't respond, the money would be rerouted to other parties. She didn't want his money, but she did want something else. Closure, control, proof that he couldn't reach her anymore. And this part hit me so hard I had to stop reading for a moment. She wrote that Thomas's estate included documents, things that could prove what he'd done, things that could protect her forever if she secured them. So, she started communicating with the lawyers as Leah, again, trying to get access without exposing me. She wrote, "I thought I could handle it alone. I thought I could keep you clean." Then the last page, the part that made my vision tunnel. Mara wrote that she'd started receiving messages, untraceable numbers, blank emails with only attachments, photos of our apartment door taken from the hallway. Someone knew where she was. Someone was watching. She wrote, "I'm not sure if Thomas is truly gone in the way that matters." And then, in the final paragraph, she wrote, "If I die, do not chase the truth for revenge. Chasing is how he caught people. Just don't sign anything. Don't let them use you to finish what he started." I lowered the letter, shaking. The woman watched me like she was watching someone bleed. "Who would use me?" I whispered. The woman's mouth tightened. "Thomas had a business partner," she said, "a man who handled things for him. I don't know his name. I only know he doesn't like loose ends." A loose end. That's what Mara had been. And by marrying her, that's what I had become. I left the apartment carrying Mara's letter like it weighed 100 pounds. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "We can settle this cleanly. Sign the documents." My hands went numb. I didn't reply. Another text came immediately, like they were watching the typing indicator that never appeared. "Your wife made a mess. Don't make it worse." My throat tightened until swallowing hurt. I went home, locked the door, and stood with my back against it like a child. Then I did the stupid human thing. I called Mara's number. It went to voicemail. I listened to her outgoing message, the cheerful, normal one she'd recorded months ago, and I broke. Not elegantly, not quietly. I slid down the door and cried until my chest ached, because grief and betrayal aren't opposites. They're siblings, and they held hands inside me. The confrontation I'd wanted. Why? How could you? Who are you? Had nowhere to land. Mara had left me with a letter and a warning, like a person setting a fire alarm on their way out of a burning building. Aftermath, cold ending. 2 days later, Gideon and Kerr emailed me directly. They didn't say, "We're sorry for your loss." They didn't say, "Take your time." They attached forms. They wrote politely that as Mara's spouse, I might have authority to sign on her behalf, and that doing so would expedite the resolution of the estate matter. They offered to send a courier. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and I remembered Mara's voicemail. "Don't sign anything." So I didn't. Instead, I forwarded every email, every document, every voicemail to the insurance investigator, and then to a lawyer of my own. I filed a police report. I gave them the unknown number texts. I gave them the folder. The officers were kind in the way people are kind when they can't promise you anything. Weeks passed in a slow, numb blur. The case didn't become a headline. There were no dramatic arrests. Real life rarely gives you the clean payoff your anger begs for. But the messages stopped. The law firm stopped contacting me. The investigators stopped knocking. It was as if whatever force had been testing the edges of my life decided I wasn't worth the friction anymore, or decided something else. I returned to work because the world doesn't care about your private collapse. I answered tickets. I restarted routers. I fixed printers. I nodded at colleagues who avoided my eyes because they didn't know what to say. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the refrigerator hum and tried to imagine the version of my life where Mara had told me the truth. On that night, she cried quietly in the dark. Sometimes I hated her for lying. Sometimes I loved her so much it felt like a fever. Most of the time, I felt something worse than either. I missed her, and missing her didn't care what her name had been. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox addressed to Jonah. No last name, no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was taken from across the street, grainy and slightly tilted as if shot quickly. It showed me standing outside my building, looking down at my phone. On the back, in neat block letters, Mara's letters, unmistakable, were 3 words: I kept you safe. I sat on my kitchen floor with the photo in my hands and understood, finally, the ugliest mercy of what she'd done. She hadn't trusted me with her truth because she wasn't protecting her secret. She was protecting my life from becoming part of it. And in that understanding, something inside me went very still. I didn't frame the photo. I didn't show anyone. I put it back in the envelope, sealed it, and slid it into the manila folder marked Hartley. Then I took the folder and buried it in the back of a closet behind winter coats, where it wouldn't tempt me into becoming the kind of person who thinks pain is solved by digging. Because the last thing Mara asked of me, her real last request, wasn't love, it was restraint.